Hi, this is Brittany Madison, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation. Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? You know, this weekend I watched Mayweather versus Pacquiao, The Legend Speak on HBO, and I did a review video talking about it. Now, of course, in that video, Jim Lampley said something that stood out so much, especially with him being a blow-by-blow announcer, and he's going to call the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight. He said something that was so unprofessional that I said when I was making that video, I have to make a whole separate video about Jim Lampley, which is why I didn't even bring up what Jim Lampley said in that video. I just didn't have the time to drop the video that same night. But anyway, moving forward, let's go ahead and get into exactly what he said and what took place. So, on this episode of The Legend Speak, Jim Lampley is sitting down and he's talking to Oscar De La Hoya and Shane Mosley about their experience in the ring with Floyd Mayweather. Jim Lampley, and he says this so casually, I think a lot of people didn't even notice it, but he says to Oscar De La Hoya, Oscar, when you were in the ring with Floyd Mayweather, in the later rounds, were you saying to yourself, how do I get this son of a bitch to fight me? I gotta force him to fight me. How do I get him to fight me? Jim Lampley calls Floyd Mayweather a son of a bitch, which gives Floyd Mayweather a 2-for-1 deal, because not only is Jim Lampley offending Floyd Mayweather, but he's offending Floyd Mayweather's father as well, all in one. Jim Lampley is what I like to call a walking conflict of interest and a walking contradiction. So Jim Lampley believes that if Floyd Mayweather is boxing in the ring, he is a son of a bitch. This is what Jim Lampley believes. Now, what's so funny about him saying this to Oscar De La Hoya is I remember when Oscar De La Hoya was fighting Felix Tito Trinidad. And we all know what happened in that fight. Oscar De La Hoya, not only did Oscar De La Hoya move the entire night, because people forget about this. Oscar moved the entire night, but he moved so much in the last 3 rounds that people forget that he was moving the whole fight. The only difference is in the last 3 rounds, Oscar didn't even elect to punch anymore. He just moved around the ring trying to secure a victory that he didn't have, right? Guess who was calling that fight? No other than Bang, Bang, Bang himself, Jim Lampley, right? Do you think Jim Lampley called Oscar De La Hoya a son of a bitch when Oscar De La Hoya decided to move in the ring without even throwing punches? Just completely move. Did Jim call him a son of a bitch? No. You know what Jim said? Jim said that this is what you call boxing. That's what Jim Lampley said. Vasyl Lomachenko, another fighter who uses a lot of movement in the ring. He uses the entire ring when he fights. Guess who calls all of his fights? That's right, Jim Lampley. How many times have we ever heard him call Vasyl a son of a bitch? The answer would be 0 times. Never. Right? Now, I already understand how this works. The ignorant decafs, they're already trying to find a way to defend Jim Lampley's behavior. So they're going to say, well, yeah, but Floyd, that's because he's an asshole, because he's this and because he's that. He's a jerk, so he deserves to be treated this way, right? And what I say to you is, or what I would ask you is, okay, well, what about Sergey Kovalev? Sergey Kovalev is even a bigger asshole. So how come Jim Lampley isn't treating Sergey like Floyd Mayweather? No comment, right? I know. It's impossible for you to answer that question and make logical sense. There is a documentary, a great documentary, based on the first black heavyweight champion's life, Jack Johnson. And it is called Unforgivable Blackness. If you guys haven't watched that documentary, I would encourage you guys to check it out. There's one part in the movie where a writer is basically talking about the double standards that exist in 1908 when Jack Johnson is in his prime. And what this guy says, and by the way, this is a white guy, it's not a black guy. But what he's saying is, you know, back in 1908, at this time, it was always a double standard. If a white fighter was a good boxer and he was elusive, he had a good defense, the fans would call that great boxing. They would say he's intelligent, he's the smartest man in boxing, and so on and so forth. But when a black guy was a great boxer and had a great defense, they would say he's scared, he's a coward, he's a runner. He basically has a permanent yellow streak going down his back. There's something deceptive about him. Okay? When a white guy could take a punch, they would say that that man is pretty much the man of steel. He has a granite chin and he's the toughest man on the planet. But when a black man had a good chin, they would say, oh, it's just because his skull is possibly thicker. I could go on, but you guys pretty much get the idea. This is what this man said. This is how he described the way things were in 1908. Well, you fast forward over 100 years later to present day, and you have Jim Lampley that is displaying that same type of hypocritical behavior in the sport of boxing today. Go back and watch Tim Bradley versus Manny Pacquiao. Because it's not just Floyd Mayweather. I know these ignorant fans, they're going to try to defend Jim Lampley and say, oh, well, you know, Mayweather is this and he's that. Jim Lampley has done this with every fighter that is on the coincidental list. Okay? He's done this with every single fighter that is at the top of the sport. You watch Tim Bradley versus Manny Pacquiao. There are moments in that fight when Tim Bradley is moving in the ring, Jim Lampley calls it retreating. When Manny Pacquiao starts moving around the ring and using angles, Jim Lampley is calling it beautiful angles. Who else could do something like that? What's so funny is Tim Bradley was using beautiful angles in the fight as well, and Emmanuel Stewart had to actually check Jim Lampley when Jim was giving Manny Pacquiao credit for doing the same thing that Tim was doing. And Emmanuel Stewart said, they're both using beautiful angles, Jim. And then Jim, you know, he kind of responded by saying, yeah, you know, something like that. But you guys get the point. Everything is a double standard with Jim Lampley. Like I said, when fighters like Lomachenko was moving around the ring, when Oscar was moving around the ring, it was beautiful boxing. When Floyd Mayweather moves around the ring, it's retreating, it's running, it's trying to prevent a fight from breaking out, so on and so forth, right? And Jim Lampley claims that he likes the aggressive fighter and so on and so forth. But when James Kirkland was fighting against Carlos Molina, who was trying to box and, in Jim Lampley's own words, trying not to fight, who was Jim Lampley praising in that fight? You think he was praising the aggressor, or do you think he was praising the boxer? Well, surprise, surprise. Because Mr. Bang, Bang, Bang was praising the boxer. Carlos Molina, a fighter who is known for punching and grabbing, right? Sometimes Carlos doesn't even throw punches. He'll just fall right into a clinch. And this is the fighter that Jim Lampley was praising the entire night. See, once again, Jim Lampley calls Floyd Mayweather a son of a bitch because he believes that Floyd Mayweather was trying to suppress the fight. But what about Vladimir Klitschko against Brian Jennings? Is he a son of a bitch, Jim? Was Brian Jennings trying to force Vladimir Klitschko to fight? We know what time it is. We know what time it is. I don't understand why they are allowing Jim Lampley to call this fight. This man is the most biased blow-by-blow announcer in history, in the history of the sport. Okay? It's just as simple as that. Man, I've even talked to Al Bernstein, and I can't tell you exactly what he says because he doesn't want me to quote him. But let's just say he says some things that I agree with when it comes to Jim Lampley, and I'll just leave it at that. Jim Lampley has a very difficult time trying to separate his emotions from him doing his job. And that's what makes him extremely unprofessional and not fit to do this type of job. It is a conflict of interest if you cannot control your personal hate for someone when you are trying to do your job. You know, it's funny because right before the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight was signed, Jim Lampley did an interview with my boy, Boxing Ego. And in that interview, Jim Lampley, he said, Floyd is not going to fight Manny Pacquiao. He's not going to fight Manny Pacquiao. He's going to fight Miguel Cotto or someone else, but he will not fight Manny Pacquiao. Right? This is what he said before the fight was signed. About 2 weeks later, the fight is signed. And now, HBO has cameras all in Jim Lampley's face, and now Jim Lampley is forced to change his tune. He goes from saying that Floyd Mayweather wasn't going to fight Manny Pacquiao to now saying that, oh, you know, this fight is already 5 years too late and so on and so forth. Now he's forced to make additional excuses, right? And I'll tell you right now, one thing about Jim Lampley, even though he hates the fighters that are on the coincidental list, he knows how good they are. And Jim Lampley truly believes deep down that Floyd Mayweather is going to win this fight. In fact, my personal opinion, I believe that Jim Lampley has always thought from day one, just like a lot of ignorant decafs, they've always thought that Floyd Mayweather was going to win this fight. They were hoping that this fight never took place so that they could have a reason to hate on Floyd Mayweather and say he's just a coward. Well, he ducked Manny Pacquiao. He never fought Manny Pacquiao. That's the reason why I don't like him. He should have fought Pacquiao. This is what they wanted to always say. But Floyd threw a huge monkey wrench in the program by actually signing a contract. Now, because people like because people like Jim Lampley and other decafs believe that Floyd is going to win the fight, they have to find another way to take credit away from Floyd Mayweather. So they say, well, the fight is 5 years past his prime, so on and so forth. Well, if the fight is 5 years past his prime, why were you just saying 6 months ago that Floyd is afraid of Manny Pacquiao? He's ducking Manny Pacquiao. If this fight was 5 years past his prime, people would have stopped saying shit like that 3 years ago or 2 years ago. They were saying Floyd Mayweather was afraid of Manny Pacquiao, shit, Hours before Floyd even signed a contract, they were saying that. The truth is something else, right? The truth will always make ignorant fans look stupid and look bad. Let's just look at the double standard for a second. If Manny Pacquiao pulled off the upset and he beat Floyd Mayweather decisively, would anybody be saying that Manny Pacquiao only won this fight because Floyd Mayweather was 38 years old and way past his prime? He didn't look good in the Marcos Maidana fight, and that was an indication that he was fading and so on and so forth. Do you think you would have that many people saying that? Absolutely not. It would be the greatest victory in the sport of boxing if Manny Pacquiao were to beat Floyd Mayweather. Just same thing with the Tim Bradley situation. When Manny Pacquiao lost to Tim Bradley was garbage. He was terrible. He didn't even deserve to be in the ring with Manny Pacquiao. But after Manny Pacquiao wins the rematch, now it's, well, he beat Tim Bradley. Tim Bradley was a beast. Tim Bradley is a beast, and he beat him. Tim Bradley was pound for pound and so on and so forth. Now it's praise after praise just because Pacquiao gets the W. It's the same thing with Mayweather versus Pacquiao. A lot of these fans, including the leader of the decafs, Jim Lampley, he's going to sit over here and he's going to discredit the fight because he believes deep down Floyd Mayweather is a much better fighter. But he hates Floyd Mayweather so much that he's already trying to take away credit from a win that he's already predicting is going to take place. How crazy is that? You know, you really have to feel sorry for people like Jim Lampley and all of the decafs that hate Floyd Mayweather. I mean, just put yourself in their shoes for a second and think about it. You hate this guy's guts, but he keeps winning. And the more he wins, the more he proves that he's the best. And you have to watch it. You have to watch this man continue to beat every fighter that you want him to lose to. And you can't do anything about it but just sit there and hate the fact that he's on top of the sport. That must really be difficult for haters to deal with, right? The guy that you hate is better than the guy that you like. And you can't do anything about it. Boy, that's got to be tough to deal with. So at the end of this show, The Legends Speak, Jim Lampley closes out by saying, you know, a lot of different media outlets, they've asked me the question, is this going to be the most significant fight that you have ever covered? And it's funny because that question puts Jim Lampley on the spot. And because of the type of person that Jim Lampley is, he replied or answered the question by basically saying that I don't know yet. I'll know that when I watch the fight. Then I could answer that question. But you have to listen to the question one more time. Because the question wasn't, is this going to be the most exciting fight that you've ever covered? Is this going to be the most action-packed, the most dramatic fight that you've ever covered? That wasn't the question. The question is this the most significant fight that you've ever covered? You don't have to watch the fight to know how significant the storyline is, right? Because this is one thing we already know going into the fight. We already know that Manny Pacquiao was considered, or some writers have called Manny Pacquiao the fighter of the decade. Floyd Mayweather has been considered the fighter of this era. He is pound for pound the number one seed in the sport of boxing today. A lot of people have Manny Pacquiao in the top 5 as one of the best fighters in the world today. This is not Lewis versus Tyson, where Tyson wasn't even in the top 20 pound for pound best fighters in the world when he fought against Lennox Lewis. Okay? This is two fighters, one considered the best in the whole wide world, the other is considered top 5, one of the best fighters in the world. Fighter of the decade versus fighter of this era. And you're telling me that you don't know if this fight is the most significant fight that you've ever covered? See, once again, the reason why Jim Lampley answers the question that way is because he believes that Floyd Mayweather is going to win this fight. And he understands if he says, yes, this is the most significant fight I ever covered, then he has to admit that the guy he hates actually won the most significant fight that he has ever covered. So what does Jim Lampley say before he answers that question? He says, well, yes, this is, the biggest economical success and so on and so forth, but I have to wait to see if this is the most significant. Yeah, you got to wait to see if Manny Pacquiao wins, because if Pacquiao wins, then it's definitely the most significant fight. Now, what's so funny is George Foreman and Max Kellerman, they agreed that this is the most significant fight since Max Schmeling versus Joe Louis rematch and Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier won, which is something Jim Lampley did not want to hear. It'll be really interesting to see how Jim Lampley calls this fight, because we know he's going to try his best to discredit every single thing that Floyd Mayweather does. Let's see if it makes a difference. I'm on to the next one.